Abraham Wald was a Romanian mathematician that was asked during World War II where to put additional armor to prevent more aircraft from being shot down. The conventional wisdom at the time was to put the additional armor on the returning airplanes where they had the most bullet holes, the wing and fuselage. This type of thinking was based on the returning aircraft, not the aircraft that were lost. Wald had some counterintuitive, controversial ideas. He recommended you put the additional armor where there were the least bullet holes, the engines. This was opposite of the recommendation of many of the engineering minds of the day. But Wald reasoned that the returning aircraft clearly proved that multiple hits to the wings and fuselage could be survived, but numerous hits to the engines could not. Wald's small insight resulted in both less fatalities and more aircraft saved to be able to return to the fight. His counterintuitive thinking resulted in more Allied victories in the air and less airmen lives lost. Wald's contribution didn't stop there. The Air Force and the Navy continued to use his methodologies in the Korean and Vietnam Wars, where more countless lives were saved. Innovation isn't always about inventing something new or a new way of doing things. Sometimes it's looking at a problem from a slightly different angle, and often considering the opposite of the typical solution. Innovators don't see different things, they see things differently. I'd like to read that to you again because it took me more than once to really understand what that means. Innovators don't see different things, they see things differently. I'm a colonel in the Air Force Reserve and an MD-11 captain for a Fortune 100 logistics company. My role at the airline is to optimize fuel efficiency. It's an important objective because fuel is our largest expense at over $1.3 billion a year. When I joined the fuel efficiency team, I learned that we air tanker fuel into our busiest hub during our busiest time of year. So what is air tankering? Air tankering is when you put enough extra fuel on an aircraft that it flies into that busiest hub, doesn't require fuel on the ground, and then it can continue on to its next destination. The conventional thinking when air tankering is that more fuel is better. But I had a hunch that this was an inefficient plan that was both costly to the airline and produced excessive CO2 emissions. My team and I crunched the numbers, and we knew if we wanted to optimize fuel efficiency and reduce carbon emission, that we needed to stop the focus and really understand what the exact fuel was by stopping adding extra fuel. If we could determine the exact amount of fuel to get that aircraft to its next destination, that would be perfect. And we found that it required much less fuel than had been previously planned. So instead of the mentality of more fuel is better, we looked at the requirements and determined what the exact fuel requirements were. This was a counterintuitive recommendation to the organization that met resistance every step of the way, because it went against the conventional thinking of how we had always air tankered fuel. If we could get the company to focus on the exact fuel versus more fuel, we knew we could save the airlines money. Turns out, we were able to save the company over $500,000 and reduce CO2 emissions by over 1,300 tons in 10 days. We only ran that plan for 10 days. Although challenging, innovation through counterintuitive thinking can have a profound impact by creating tremendous efficiencies, increasing the company's bottom line, and positively impacting the environment. It can also, that counterintuitive thinking, save lives. Once on a 5.5-hour mission, flying from Southern California to Hawaii, we were refueling 6 F-18 aircraft. The F-18s are very fast aircraft, but they cannot fly over the ocean without aerial refueling. On this particular mission, halfway across the Pacific, one of those aircraft suffered an engine failure, and I can tell you the nearest piece of land was about 1,250 miles away. So I want you to take a moment and imagine how that pilot was feeling when that happened. He just lost an engine. He is now unable to hold altitude. He is leaving his lifeline of that tanker above. He doesn't know if he has enough fuel to make it to Hawaii, and I'm confident that he was questioning his ultimate fate at that point. My team and I had to come up with a plan quickly on how we're going to refuel that disabled aircraft. I can tell you, there aren't any procedures for that type of, there isn't a procedure in this particular situation. If we did not figure out a plan, that mission was going to end catastrophically. We tried once we caught up to him in the descent, we tried all the typical procedures on how you would refuel him. But with each of those options, it threatened to make his aircraft more unstable. If we did not consider the most out-of-the-box, counterintuitive solution, he would have not made it. So we tried to think of something different. We allowed both airplanes to descend together in what is a slow aircraft refueling technique called a controlled descent. This is not a procedure that we normally use on an F-18. However, in this case, a slow aircraft refueling procedure on a fast airplane worked. In this case, a fast airplane problem required a slow airplane solution. We were able to get him the gas. He safely made it to Hawaii. And I can tell you when I saw him later that night, I hadn't seen a happier pilot. And I couldn't be happier than sharing my ties with him. So I'd like to leave you with these final thoughts. Continue to strive to see things differently. Be open to ideas that go against the conventional thinking. And despite the resistance that thinking can often bring, embracing the counterintuitive can make all the difference. Thank you.